welcome to the Randall Report, Season 1, Episode 6.
I'm still perplexed by the clapperboard, but it's fun. Good afternoon, welcome to the Randall Report. Today we're going to be actually talking about the ending of COVID restrictions, certainly here in England. But obviously it's worth a mention given the news that we are going to be doing a special.
What's happened?
What's happened? In case it escaped your notice, Russia has invaded Ukraine and the world is kind of on the brink, which has been occupying the news. But of course you know this already, you're just being devil's advocate, aren't you?
Didn't have a clue.
Didn't have a clue?
Not a clue.
Okay, but yes, so we'll be doing a special on obviously Ukraine and Russia, and we're going to probably do that straight after, aren't we?
Going to have to do some homework.
And some homework. Have you not been doing your homework? You've been a naughty boy.
Yeah, today, unfortunately.
Yeah, right.
We'll see how things pan out.
Well, I'm sure that you will, as incisive as you usually are, you will be not short of anything to say, such as your knowledge and breadth. So, yes. So anyway, today we're actually going to talk about the ending of COVID restrictions, which of course has been overrun.
Today, right?
Yeah.
Is it today?
What?
That the restrictions have been lifted fully?
They've been
in the UK.
Some of them had already been
England.
lifted in England.
Yeah.
Obviously, the rules are slightly different in Scotland and Wales. I think it was from yesterday or from today the ending of the necessary to wear masks on public transport. It was yesterday.
But they're still suggesting that you continue.
Yes, the advice and
private hire vehicles as well.
Yes, I think the people need to, just because the rules are what they are doesn't mean people shouldn't go their own way and take some personal responsibility. I think that's incumbent upon all of us, really. Yeah. And just because the rule says a particular thing doesn't necessarily mean we should go sod it. Because the fact of the matter is, of course, COVID hasn't gone away. It's just gone away in the news, more or less, because a line has kind of been drawn under it, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But obviously, we'll do this special on obviously the Russia attacking Ukraine. Yes, in terms of COVID, ending COVID restrictions. Before we get into that, what else has kind of caught your attention over the last few days? Susie, I think you wanted to say something about, you mentioned to me about the death of JeanLuc Bruno.
Absolutely. That sort of disappeared, didn't it, since...
Yeah, very quickly disappeared, and it kind of only had edges on particular news broadcasts.
So essentially, Mr. Bruno was a close advisor.
Yes, he had a modelling agency.
Epstein.
For Epstein, yes.
Who committed suicide, apparently, in his cell a few years back.
And now
Mr.
Brunel has been found hung in his cell.
In France.
Yes. Bit curious.
No CCTV
again
available, oddly enough, was another one.
Yeah.
And I don't quite understand how you actually capable of hanging yourself in a cell in the first place, because in theory you shouldn't have the tools or equipment to enable yourself to do such a thing. So it's all very, very unusual. The timing obviously was also incredibly strange. Literally, sorry, touching the knob.
He loves playing with my drawers, but be careful with that. Yeah. Not the ones I'm wearing. This is strictly a family show. The drawers in the table.
Okay, where were we?
Where were we? We were talking about Brunel hung in his cell.
Yeah. So we're talking about the timing.
Yes.
So he
Curious.
He hung himself.
Yep.
48 hours after our wonderful Prince Andrew paid £12 million
We think it was around 12 million.
to silence.
It's untold sum.
What's her name?
Guthrie.
Guthrie.
Yes, Miss Guthrie.
So our Prince Andrew paid £12 million to a woman who he didn't touch, apparently, because that's what we do these days.
Yes.
So Simon,
exactly.
you'll be receiving £1 million check.
Well,
for my not touching or abusing you.
For playing with the drawers or the microphone, for that matter. I mean, this Brunel had this modelling agency and closely linked to Epstein, of course.
And
he had offices interestingly, in Miami, New York, and Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
So a little bit interesting as to all the possible connections. There's one for the conspirators. Who else was really involved behind Epstein? Why did they decide to go the route of hanging themselves? It all seems very strange.
And now what happens to Ghislaine Maxwell? Because she must be sweating at this point, seeing that all of her co-conspirators have, topped themselves. How safe is she?
If they have, yes.
Obviously, we can all make our own assumptions here. But what happens to her? Have they increased security in the facility she's in? Clearly she's at risk.
What deals are being made?
It hasn't really been clarified. In terms of Ghislaine Maxwell and what happens. I think they were talking about, was it a retrial potentially?
Yes, she'd actually tried to, because one of the jurors, I think his name was Scott, had alluded to having been suffered abuse, I believe.
And he didn't tell, and obviously he didn't tell the
but I would have
courts at the time.
And of course they tried to use that as grounds to declare a mistrial of Ghislaine Maxwell. But I think that's kind of a bit spurious, really. I would have thought that any juror, juror who had experienced stuff wouldn't necessarily, they're all there to base on the evidence of that particular case. It maybe have made him more insightful as to the kind of things that
It would appear to me that, considering what the case was about, that you could sort of add two and two together and essentially say, look, if you have had any experience, relating to the case, relating to the subject matter, that you should recuse yourself, because you might have, your view might be sort of leaning towards a certain point of view when you're supposed to be completely...
But, that's a tenuous thing, because if, I guess out of a jury of 12 people, there might be one or two others that would never, ever in their entire lives admit to having suffered abuse. And so, would you ever really?
Okay, but we're making some real assumptions here.
Yes, of course.
He really did have, an experience, a negative experience.
Yes.
Relating very closely to the case. I mean, in theory, either the prosecutor or the defence would have asked questions of him beforehand to ascertain.
Yes, they usually do, don't they?
Whether or not he was suitable or not.
And they only let it out later in an interview. So,
but it's enough that sort of the defence could say, look, he is aligned to a particular point of view.
Yeah.
It might have swung the difference between a decision or not.
Yep.
So I mean, I can see why they're pushing for it.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it's it's hoping that Ghislaine Maxwell doesn't come to a unfortunate end, because it already looks...
Well, I still think she has much information to give, so who knows how that story's going to play out. But we are going to be discussing the whole issue of Andrew's connection to it in another episode, which where we talk about the viability of the royal family We were obviously events kind of overtaken, and for reasons of being a little sympathetic to Her Majesty. From the point of view, bless her, hope she makes a quick recovery
We all wish the Queen,
from her bout of COVID herself. I mean, which can't be an easy
we
thing
wish
at
the
the age of
Queen
95.
a very speedy recovery.
Yeah.
Because we really don't want Charles.
Yes.
So please stay with us for as long as you possibly can.
Yes. So any sorry for any Charles supporters. Be throwing him under the bus again. You obviously didn't like his biscuits as much as you said you did.
Well, no, the Dutchy lemon melts are wonderful.
Okay.
You can also get sort of other lemon-related biscuits in supermarkets across the country
that aren't.
That aren't.
Yes. Right. Okay. So, but we want to talk today about obviously COVID-19 and the ending of the restrictions. And we've completely ended the restrictions, and such as isolation rules. We've kind of abandoned testing. If people want to test, they're going to have to pay for them, and I think that raises questions in itself. I know it's been costing the taxpayer upwards of $2 billion a month for the tests.
So unless you're over 80 or have significant health conditions, then it's still free.
Right. Okay.
Everyone else has to pay.
And I guess, since the start of the pandemic, we've seen in this country around 160,000 deaths. And whilst the death toll has been falling, there were still over 1,000 deaths within 28 days of testing positive, which I really find that premise rather odd in terms of compiling statistics. What about the person that dies on the 29th day? They don't get counted. Between 14th and 20th of February, so that was 1,000 deaths. And I notice, I think early part of this week, it had dropped to about 46, 49 deaths per day. But Wednesday, it shot up threefold to 165. So, posing a bit of a question.
Well, we can assume that numbers will start to rocket up now.
Well, of course, with the gloves off a little bit, I would imagine it might. There's the possibility of a spike. There's still possibilities of new variants. But even with those deaths, even dropping to that period, the number between the 14th and 20th of February, that's still 52,000 deaths per year. And I guess one of my questions, is where do you consider what is considered a reasonable number of fatalities to suddenly start ignoring the number of deaths that are happening. And of course, if you take over the look at the 165 deaths over the 24-hour period midweek this week, obviously that number is considerably higher over a year. Is the complete lifting of restrictions and not kind of at least keeping mask wearing in certain places and in certain circumstances, isn't that more of a common sense approach? Do you think this is a little bit kind of smacks of pandering, Boris Johnson pandering to some of his backbenchers who've been calling for this and roundly against it? What's your feeling on this whole thing of ending restrictions? Do you think we've kind of been a bit too from one extreme to the other with it?
Well, I mean, I think he's had to do this now because this is a distraction from Partygate. So I think he had to put a good story out to the public to try and sweep under the carpet the mess that's been going on behind the scenes with his sort of antics.
Yeah.
Well, not only him, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, everyone's sort of been doing it to one extreme or another. So I think ending the restrictions was a positive piece in a sort of slightly negative quagmire that was being created. So I think he did it partially for that reason. Maybe he would have originally done it a few months down the line, but he thought, no, let's just speed it up because it's a good story. We're now supposed to be in this new phase of living with COVID, aren't we? This is this new thing that they're
the
talking
mantra
about.
of living with COVID. But
so I suppose we just have to learn to accept that you know, people will get ill, people will die, assuming that sort of the vaccinations and treatments will improve over time as well. You know, it will become more flu-like unless a new variant comes in. But weren't they talking recently about the Delta and the Omicron variant fusing? They're calling it the Deltacron.
oh crikey!
Have you not heard that? That was
heard
a few days ago.
Yes, I mean, undoubtedly there'll be no.
But I think that's the point. The government knows that there's a limit to what people are willing to accept. I think we're sort of getting close to that tipping point now. So they decided, well, we need to draw a line in between, you know, people's freedoms and their health. And
yes.
they've taken the decision whereby they'll sacrifice.
Yeah, it's an interesting word. Sacrifice.
They'll sacrifice some people.
Yeah, we're the sacrificial lambs.
To make sure that we have a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
Me personally, I'm still very cautious.
Yes, me too.
I'm wearing my mask. I'm in shops, you know, public transport when I use it, private cabs when I use them.
Yeah.
I wear my mask. You know, I'm careful about removing my clothes at the front door, you know, and then sort of getting changed.
That must give the neighbours a bit of an eyeful.
I'll shut the door.
Oh, you shut the door first. It's good.
No, but
don't be hanging around where he lives, but I'm not giving out the address.
I have outdoor clothes and I have indoor clothes.
Me too.
It just seems reasonable to do so.
Yes.
It might take a bit more time, but it's something that I'll do.
I'll tell you a little anecdote.
Is it clean?
Well, it is about outdoor clothes and indoor clothes, and to be aware that your indoor clothes can sometimes be somewhat revealing to the outdoor without realising it.
I think you've told me this story and we really shouldn't repeat it.
Fair enough. You can read it in my book of short stories, which will be hopefully coming out before the year is done, which is... Yes, it's really Simon's Meldrew moments, isn't it? Throughout my life.
You're not telling that story now.
No, not on a family show.
No.
Although there's nothing smutty or horrible about it. So yeah, we've kind of taken off all these restrictions. I guess one of the concerns I have is it kind of is a bit of a failure to recognise those that are more vulnerable in our society. That at least if we had been asked, or rather the restrictions were still in place to wear masks and have certain controls in place, would have afforded them a bit extra protection. And I kind of feel that the more vulnerable, I mean, there's people with immunodeficiency or disorders, people who are recovering from cancer, because obviously if you've had cancer treatment, it leaves your immune system completely bare.
Cancer treatment at the NHS has been really, really poorly treated over the past few years.
Yeah.
You know, I know a few people that have really suffered at the moment because treatment is very hard to come by because obviously they've sort of been bumped down the list.
Yes, I met somebody the other day in the street that, funnily enough, I was with Matt, and he's known this guy since school, and hadn't seen him for a long time, and he said to him, "How are you?" And the guy said, "Well, actually, I had a heart attack, and I had this heart attack, the second one he'd had, and they called for an ambulance, and they said, 'Sorry, you're not a priority.'"
Yeah.
And he finished up crawling down the street to try and get help, which is pretty awful. I can't imagine.
Try getting an ambulance for pretty much anything is hard to do.
Yes.
Because you've got to go through 112 first. And
111?
Is it 111? Who have I been calling?
At the third stroke. No, not the speaking clock. It's definitely not the speaking clock.
Is it 111?
I'm sure it's 111.
Okay, fine.
I know.
Because then you have to answer the 30 questions that they ask you, and if you don't answer them the way they want you to, they don't send an ambulance out.
Yes, I know.
It happened to my mother.
It's a weird thing.
And I had to hire a car to drive her to the A&E instead.
Crikey.
I mean,
Well, funnily enough,
for an arrhythmia, by the way, I mean, it's not a small thing. Her resting heart rate was 130
whoa,
a minute.
Wow.
And then when we spoke to the lady at 111, she's like, no, it's not serious enough. It's like, my mum's dying here.
So the next time you'll have to remember to tell them that it's 150. What's the number?
Yeah,
what's the number where they'll send you the ambulance? That's what you've got to find out, and then work to that number and just say, well, actually, it's calmed down since I called you.
But it's generally scary. You have to,
I mean, we know obviously the latest incarnation of COVID, the Omicron, produced much milder symptoms, although it's more transmissible, of course. Do you think that's probably lulled us all into a false sense of security that we're kind of, this is it now, it's done and dusted and over? Do you think that's playing into the narrative?
But it's psychological, isn't it? Because we're hoping, we're praying that COVID will become sort of milder and milder and milder as people expect it to do. But
it depends on your version of mild. I mean, I had Omicron this Christmas, and my second brush with COVID, unfortunately, 2 Christmases on the flaming trot. I mean, there you go. I thought I'd escaped it, and lo and behold, I was even reticent about cooking my big baked ham and the turkey. And getting all those things prepared, only to have to throw it all in the bin if I took ill, then on the run up to Christmas.
Yeah, but Simon, you almost wished it upon yourself, though, didn't you?
Well, no, I could see it kind of coming because my Matt, my lovely husband, there you go. If you're wondering whether I'm a friend of Dorothy.
Who's Dorothy?
Oh, that's what gay people back in the 70s and 80s used to, or before that actually, turn themselves. Dorothy as in Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
That's where it relates to. But Matt at his place of work, one by one, they were succumbing to COVID during the weeks running up to Christmas, until eventually there was only 2 of them left. And because they'd been taking extraordinary care, testing twice a day, it got to Christmas Eve, and we kind of heaved a sigh of relief, thinking, well, okay, we're okay, we've got there. So I merrily baked the ham on Christmas Eve and cooked the turkey on Christmas Day, and then lo and behold, on Christmas night, started to feel poorly.
Maybe the ham gave you COVID.
Oh God, back to the. Do you think so? No, I doubt it. But I got it and took it on the stomach gastrically.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, it has taken until about a week and a half ago to really feel that I'd completely eradicated the sort of overhang of it. I had all sorts of problems. Yes.
We're still talking around 2 months, right?
Absolutely. I had all sorts of problems. But then, one of my neighbours caught COVID in March 2020 and is still suffering today with long COVID. And that's another subject I wanted to get onto. We've kind of, pushed it that Omicron, it's all getting milder, it's all kind of over and done with. But there's the issues of long COVID affecting more than 1 million people in this country. And to simply say that Omicron, I'm sure, can cause long COVID just as much as any other variant. Are we not ignoring by just completely ending all restrictions what kind of economic impact on our health services? Of what is a very debilitating condition of long COVID. And those numbers then are likely to grow.
Yeah. But we don't know what the threshold is. So I'm assuming that someone at the sort of Ministry of Health has decided that, if infections and deaths reach a certain threshold, then we'll sort of be back into restrictive territory again.
But if the
we don't know what it is.
If the infections are mild, but then you're getting a proportion of those people infected, a large number of infections, but the proportion of those that then get in long COVID and are effectively out of the economic loop, in some cases permanently.
Yeah.
I mean, most notable, you've got Kate Garraway. Bless her. I mean, I can't imagine what that must be like. But seemingly it doesn't look like he's ever going to make a complete recovery.
Interestingly about him though is that she flew him to Mexico for treatment. So clearly there was.
Did she?
Yeah, clearly there was some sort of treatment that wasn't available. I'm assuming either on the NHS or privately in the UK.
Sure, it wasn't a big excuse for a Coke fest. Sorry, Kate. No, did she flew her husband for treatment in Mexico?
Yeah, but now you've made such a bad joke out of it.
No, not at all. I mean, we know what Mexico's famous. I mean, I went to Mexico on holiday once, and I couldn't go anywhere without being offered it.
Beaches and tequila.
Beaches
and tequila.
And what kind of treatment? Do you know? Were you aware of what?
I don't know.
No, you don't know.
I don't know what the treatment was.
But
obviously, whatever it was, it wasn't available here.
Effectively, he's got this extreme form of long COVID, and I just wonder whether by ending all the restrictions, are we failing to recognise the impact of something that is largely being totally ignored?
Maybe he's making it up.
Maybe he's making it up.
Yeah.
I doubt it. Bless him. I feel for Kate. I think she's extraordinary. How she's carried on working and how she's the stoic. That's the only way to describe her. Stoic. Brilliant. But I just think we've kind of let it go a bit, and we're not thinking the long game just by taking all the restrictions away. And I think it's a bit. I feel like it's a bit of foolishness.
Well, no, it's soon enough. Within a month or two, if cases start to rise, a decision will be made that sort of we took this action too soon, and we need to go back to some level of restriction to maintain the infection rate. But we won't know. I'm assuming this is a test, not only for us but also for the government, just to ascertain what happens. When there's nothing in place to try and mitigate the infection rate. So let's wait and see.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I would definitely urge, if you're already taking precautions, continue that, even if it's for your own self-interest.
Well, for me, like yourself, I see no reason to change my habits of wearing a mask whenever I'm out in supermarkets and so forth. I just see it as whether the masks, how effective they are, but at the end of the day, even if they reduce it marginally, the possibility of catching it marginally or passing it on marginally.
And consider many people are also
the right thing to do.
Inconsiderate.
Yeah. I notice, funnily enough, another thing I wanted to touch on. What are your thoughts on this? We've ended the requirement for tests coming back when you've been away abroad. But there's still the requirement of the passenger locator form. to fill in. What do you make of that? I kind of feel as though that's kind of saying something else.
It's a form of data collection of sorts, almost.
Yes.
Maybe it might just be another layer of immigration, that you need to go through. People coming into the UK. Obviously, on that form you have your name, your address, where you'll be staying over the course of your stay.
Yeah.
Your phone number, your email address, your passport details. It's a convenient way to collect data on foreign nationals and non-foreign nationals entering the country. Whether that has some sort of, whether there's a plan for that information down the line, I don't know. I think what got my attention is when we were away last September, is having to get all these tests. Obviously, we were fully vaccinated, but we had to have a test before we left the place that we were staying, 2 days before, I believe, 72 hours before. And then another test after we got the 2-day test, after arriving back in Britain. We had all those forms to fill in. I remember we were in our hotel in Spain, trying to sort all of this out until about 4 o'clock in the flaming morning. And then nobody took a blind bit of notice of it when we got back to Britain. So it felt like it had all been, to be honest,
for nothing.
When we went to Italy, we had to fill out all those forms.
Yeah.
And when we gave it to the immigration guy, he basically put it in the bin.
Crack it.
So I was like, so what's the point of doing it? He didn't really care.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine.
So do you think it's overall then? Do you think we should be? Should the rules actually still be in place for certain things?
Yeah, I think it's the certain aspects that you have to look at. For me, schools are a big one.
Yes.
Hospitals and nursing homes is another big one.
Yes.
And public transport, I'd say specifically the underground.
Yes, I agree.
Because you can't put hundreds of people in a tube, close together, very little air circulation, and not expect people to get ill.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And then children are even worse, because obviously they run around, they beat each other up, they lick each other, who knows what they do. You're gonna get ill. Children are dangerous. You're gonna get sick.
They are walking petri dishes. Bless them.
But not only are they going to make themselves ill, obviously they come home.
They pass it to family members,
to their parents, and all the rest of it.
I guess that must be also your concern, that without masks, etc., you've got an elderly parent at home, that you obviously fear for her well-being through the lack of controls externally, that you might unwittingly, or your partner might unwittingly bring it into the property. I know you're taking great care.
It's a good thing that my mother is already relatively antisocial, so it's fine. But still.
Another friend of hers described her as a bit cantankerous, I understand, but I reserve my judgment because I've never really spoken to her. I saw her leaning out of the upstairs window once with a fag on.
But I'll tell you what the issue is.
Yeah.
Is that because my mother was offered the flu jab quite a few times. She took it once and became ill.
Yes,
then the following year she took it again on GP's advice, and she got ill again.
I know.
And so because of those two experiences,
she put her off.
She decided that she would never have a flu jab. Now, as soon as COVID happened, because she was concerned about what the flu jab did to her, that she wasn't prepared to have a COVID jab either.
Yeah.
So my mother's in her 80s, isn't vaccinated, and if she were to get ill, I'm pretty sure that would be the end of her.
Yeah.
So I have to be even more cautious with my own mother.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, we kind of do need to isolate her, and she's only really around, myself and
ironically,
and Justine and everything else. But there's no other way of being able to protect it, but luckily we're relatively sort of...
Of course, I don't. I mean, obviously, I don't want to get into the subject of vaccinations. It's a very tenuous thing that can cause a lot of issues. I'm actually pro-vaccine, but I do take the point, having had the flu vaccine a number of times, that every single time I had the flu vaccine, I did end up catching the flu some weeks later, which I found rather ironic. And every year that I've not had the flu vaccine, I've been absolutely fine. But of course, that can be just by luck rather than judgment. But I hasten to add where COVID's concerned, not least because I want to be able to travel largely with impunity, that I am fully vaxxed with the booster and all, even though I absolutely hate needles. Interestingly, talking about COVID, I was reading something about a mysterious respiratory illness, a pandemic that, or rather it was a pandemic in 1889, which emerged in Russia. 1889, not 1980, 1889, and then spread across the globe, triggering at least 3 waves of infection over the course of several years. And now some scientists are saying that this illness, whilst they can't prove it unequivocally, which was dubbed at the time the Russian flu, actually may have been caused by a coronavirus similar to SARS-CoV-2, which I thought was kind of interesting. That was reported, I believe, in the New York Times.
Do you remember in the 20th century when there was a spate of... Was it...
Well, curiously, I wasn't around for the entirety of the 20th
sorry,
century.
21st century, my fault.
Oh, good. I know I'm old,
but it was in Russia, and there was a small island in Russia where people started getting... What happens when bits fall off your body?
Oh God!
Not rabies.
No.
What's it called?
Oh dear, we'll have to come back to that. Yes, here we go. The dementia's kicked in. Oh my word! It's a biblical, almost biblical illness. It goes back good God!
Hold on.
Well, you have a look at that while I.
What do I Google? When bits fall off your body?
Well, no. How weird that has fallen off the radar with both our... this is the time to go and hunt out, of course, the lemon drizzle biscuits, or the lemony things. Begins with an I, I believe. Leprosy.
Thank you.
Begins with an I. Yeah. Leprosy. That was the one.
So there was an island with, I think, 350 inhabitants or something like that.
Yes.
And they started to develop leprosy.
Wow.
Now the only way in and out of the island was via a bridge.
Yes.
So what did the local government do? They blew the bridge up.
Right. Well, of course, the age-old thing of the leper colonies, where nobody was allowed near them.
This is only like 20 years ago.
Wow.
So they said, we can't afford to have this spread because it was some highly infectious form of leprosy.
Wow.
But they essentially said, I'm sorry, guys.
But it still exists.
But this is it. So they essentially destroyed the bridge and they airlifted food in, but eventually everyone died.
Scary disease. Scary.
But I mean, at what point... If things get out of control, does the government say, we can't assist you anymore and we have to now think about containment as opposed to treatment? Well, because I understand we're not there yet, but I mean, should a much more virulent form of SARS come out that kills huge amounts of people?
Well, undoubtedly there will be. I noticed, undoubtedly there will be, because I noticed 2021 was the worst year for bird-type flus, and infection of people has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
Supergonorrhea is a huge problem. You heard about that?
I have, yes. Untreatable.
Untreatable supergonorrhea?
Yes.
which is a huge issue.
Of course it is, because it's very easy to catch.
It's not really being spoken about either.
A new strain of HIV, which is worth mentioning, which is far more transmissible than HIV 1 and 2.
That's something also
the cases of in the Netherlands, that's going to be worth a subject matter all of its own, because that has ramifications going down the line in terms of not only health impact, economic impact. It's worth noting that they believe at the moment that it is treatable by the same means as the existing methods. Anyway, look, I'm in no doubt that we all wish to put the last 2 years behind us as quickly as possible and consign this really rather horrible period to the dustbin of history. Did I have to edit that? Or not edited, as the case may be. Fuck it.
If that word doesn't exist, we need to bring that in.
History. Yes. These teeth, I can tell you. I have to get them. I have to get some of that tooth glue. Oh, hang on a minute, they are my own. Consign it to the dustbin of history, even. Because obviously the impact upon families, mental health, the global economy and the health system has been utterly profound, and will, I suspect, considerably, will remain the case for some considerable time to come. But there does come a point where we do have to live with the virus, as our glorious leader, our glorious government has intimated. And, otherwise, really, we're not living at all, but just kind of existing in a space of permanent paranoia of our own sort of fragile existence. So we do have to learn to come to terms with it and kind of move on, because otherwise, as I said, we're not really living at all. Which brings me actually to the quote of the week, of the day, which I found, which I thought was rather appropriate, from the great Maya Angelou. You familiar with Maya Angelou?
Yep.
Yeah? Fantastic. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humour, and some style. And on that note, look out, obviously, for the special on Ukraine and Russia. And,
And please like and subscribe, everybody.
Please.
Actually, on that note, thank you for everyone so far who has subscribed or watched.
Yes, it's much appreciated.
Very much appreciated.
Yes.
We didn't think we were going to get a single person looking.
Yeah.
But it's actually seems quite well.
We need to get to the goal that I can afford to eat during my twilight years, which, believe me, are coming closer by the minute.
So if you don't want Simon to starve, please like and subscribe.
Yes, exactly. And on that note...
bye, everybody.
Yes. Cheerio.